What do you think about when you hear John Wayne's name? Cowboys? Controversial Playboy interviews from 50 years ago? His swaggerful gait? Or maybe he's just that actor that old people like.
I sure love you. So?
Whatever you know him for, however you remember him, this all contributes to his mythos, the legend that is John Wayne. In The Power of Myth, Joseph Campbell asserts that it is possible for people to enter the sphere of mythology. He says there is something magical about films. The person you are looking at is somewhere else at the same time. That is the condition of the god. John Wayne, the actor, ceased being a person and became a myth, a legend, a modern-day god. Many actors experience this elevation, this otherness. For some, the very thing that made them famous becomes their greatest hindrance, often described as typecasting.
Because when someone sees you do one thing, they're just like, that's all they can do, that's what they're gonna do now. When you're on a television show and then the show goes on for 7 years, I don't blame anybody for assuming that is who I am and that's all I can do.
Hey, aren't you the horse from Horsing Around?
However, for others, they're able to define the course of their career across several roles and evolve with time. On Christmas Day in 1981, Taps was released, and in just his second role, the blueprint for Tom Cruise's future was drafted, and the foundations for his legacy cemented. How did Taps serve as an early cement mixer in Tom Cruise's career? Let's find out. This is Cruise Through Cinema. Harold Becker's Taps is an American military drama with a young star-spangled studded cast, including Timothy Hutton, who many may recognize as the dad in From Up on Hill House on Netflix, two-time Academy Award winner Sean Penn in his very first role, Gus Fring complaining about PB&Js and getting lit on fire, and of course, the ever-legendary Tom Cruise, in his second credited but first major starring role. The film revolves around these boys as they fight to protect their military academy. It is reminiscent of William Golding's classic, Lord of the Flies. It is perhaps too fitting that a film that helped define Tom Cruise's mythos should be associated with a modern-day myth such as Lord of the Flies. Have I read it? The allegorical timeless tale of man, his dark impulses, and society, which represents the ultimate yet ambiguous struggle between good and evil? I haven't, but I've seen Star Wars. That's basically the same thing. We checked. Page 177 of the Perigee edition does in fact feature a saber duel. For those, like Kevin, that are not entirely familiar with Lord of the Flies, it is a 1953 novel in which a group of schoolboys crash land onto a deserted island. Three boys immediately rise to the forefront: Ralph, the elected leader, Piggy, the advocate for society and reason, and Jack, the violent choir boy with an aggressive beret and leader of the hunters, because apparently choir boys were the cool ones in the 1950s. At first, the boys focus on being rescued. However, their plans for rescue are quickly forgotten as they fight for power and survival and ultimately descend into the utter chaos that is the base human instinct. Similarly, the film first establishes a dichotomy between society and the academy visually through the main gate of the school, where, just outside, civilian boys taunt the cadets. Later, the cadets take over the school by force and lock the gate, effectively isolating the academy entirely from society, almost like a plane crash landing onto a deserted island. From there, the same three archetypes emerge: Cadet Major Brian Moreland as the de facto leader of the group, Cadet Captain Alex Dwyer as the voice of reason and humanity, and Red Beret Cadet Captain David Shawn as the voice of war and violence. Throughout the film, Alex tries to reason with Brian and appeal to his humanity. He is averse to violence and often criticizes David's brash and unpredictable tendencies. This conflict between Alex and David is introduced in the first scene with the three boys.
Brian, Dungeons and Dragons game today?
Not tonight, Sean.
Nice you to ask.
I think he kind of likes me, but he's shy.
At first glance, it appears that David enjoys D&D because he's a nerd. But given that this is his introductory line, we took a closer look as what this could possibly be indicative of. D&D, as many of you know, is a fantasy role-playing strategy game.
It's a role-playing game. It takes place entirely in our collective imagination.
Of course, a military cadet such as David is no doubt drawn to the strategic aspect of the game. But even deeper, David is living in his own fantasy world. The situation and violence that arises is a game to him. Thus, the Academy becomes a fantasy battleground for Brian's soul. As the film progresses, the boys are gradually estranged from civilization, literally and metaphorically. For instance, many basic necessities, such as running water, are turned off. The boys eventually reach a point where their fundamental misconceptions about society lead to a loss of not only innocence but humanity itself. This is most clearly demonstrated in this scene. Finally reaching his breaking point as he witnesses the horrors of a meaningless war, Alex taunts Brian and the two fight, a visual representation of Brian's internal conflicts with his own humanity. As the fight becomes more violent, the light, their last base necessity, goes out. The only source of light is from outside the gate, shining through the window. The boys have descended into darkness, their last ties to society, reason, and human decency severed.
Wow. Now that's deep.
It was a G.I.
Most
Jane.
interestingly, the scene very closely resembles the saber battle in Lord of the Flies, except in the book, this fight is between Ralph and choir boy Jack. In other words, this fight should be between Brian and David. So what is David doing during the fight instead?
Stay back.
He's giving them space to fight, an overseer goading them, encouraging them. Tom's role extends far beyond just another one of the boys. In fact, many of the issues that arise throughout the film are caused by his own actions. He's like Ares, the god of war himself, bringing out the worst in every character and situation, almost like a dungeon master manipulating the game throughout.
Huzzah! Is that right?
In such, Tom Cruise becomes the manifestation of war and violence, the Lord of the Flies incarnate. It is no wonder Harold Becker struggled to find the right actor for such a significant role. According to Becker, Cruise was actually one of the extras. Upon seeing Cruise's passion and fervor for learning military techniques, Becker finally picked Cruise.
I just saw a guy who could bring such conviction to a role and realized I had found my other lead.
And thus, Tom Cruise's mythos began stirring in the mixer.
So much of what you see in Tom even today is already in this character.
We see him as a military man, an arrogant rebel. We see that intensity, that seriousness. However, it is worth noting there are several aspects of this role that are not fully aligned with his image. For example, here he serves more as an antagonist rather than his usual protagonist role. Therefore, perhaps most fittingly of all is that he is no more than a high school cadet at a military academy still trying to discover who he is truly meant to become, the legend that is Tom Cruise. In March 1983, Tom Cruise starred as one of the rebellious greasers in the film adaptation of S.E. Hinton's classic, The Outsiders, which we'll be discussing in the next episode. Grab your denim jackets and switchblades because you, me, and Ponyboy are about to jump into the rumble of a lifetime. Thanks for hopping aboard this cruise through cinema. See yins next time.
I love movies.